Welcome back to Plague Scythe Studios, everyone. Ryan here, checking out the last of Mercuriall's trio of premium VST plugins with the U530. This plugin is based off of the ENGL E530 Tube Preamp and has been used by reputable musicians all across the globe, both in the studio and on tour. I'd go as far to say this is one of ENGL's more iconic products. It packs the iron ball, power ball kind of tone into a very small form factor, and because of that, that's reflected in the plugin itself. This one's a bit of a bare bones plugin, kind of like Spark was, where it's really just focusing on the preamp section and throws you a little bit of power amp emulation as well as cabinet simulation with built-in impulse responses, and even builds in their chorus that is now available for free as a standalone. But that's pretty much what this plugin does, but it packs a lot of tone. And as usual, I'll be showing you a handful of custom presets that showcase multiple genres. And once again, huge thanks to Mercuriall because they make these videos possible. And with that, let's jump into some Cubase. Let's start off with a quick tour of the UI. As always, like Spark, this one is going to be fairly quick, seeing as how this is the screen. That's it. We're dealing with a preamp section. We do have a power amp emulation going on, but there's no like adjustments to be made. Down here you have the cabinet section, and got some power or some preamp tube models to play with, some oversampling, all that good stuff. But that's pretty much what you see is what you get. No built-in stop boxes. You do have a chorus effect that is built into this, which is pretty much the free standalone plugin they've now released, built in to the rack unit here. And that's pretty much what U530 is. So we'll start off with a clean section. What is pretty cool about this plugin is that it is practically identical in layout to the real preamp. The real preamp, I don't remember if it's 1U or 2U. I want to say it's a 2U unit, but I'm pretty sure it's completely horizontal, but everything is pretty much here, which is pretty cool. With the clean channel, you have your basic gain structure. I find you get some nice breakup past the 130, 2 o'clock region, which can work really well for a lot of genres. Bright switch, which I like on most of the time, bass, middle, treble, overall volume. One cool feature that I'm pretty sure is on the real preamp as well is this low clean boost, and basically that just adds I think it's a 3 to 6 decibel boost on your guitar input only on the clean channel, which is really cool because there'll be a lot of applications where I'll be playing through a real amp and I'd like to have a clean boost into the clean section because it's a different effect than just turning up the gain. It really just makes your guitar louder and fuller, kind of a compression effect almost, but you don't want that pedal or whatever clean boost you have engaged on your high gain stuff because you're already using overdrive or you have it set up to your specifications. So that's a really cool feature, and you'll be able to hear it here. Quite like it. Up here also on the top row we have the mix, depth, and speed for the chorus controls. Again, this is pretty much the standalone pedal that Mercuriall has now released, and it's a very, very good sounding plugin. I'd recommend anyone that needs a chorus or stereo widener to check it out. The final switch on this top row is the cabinet simulation, which you can come down here to adjust. It's pretty much the same thing as you've seen in the other Mercuriall products, although there's a couple of these IRs that I don't quite remember being in re-axis. So you have some 2x12s, 1x12, a lot of 4x12s, T75s, G12Ms, V30s, generally being my favorite for this kind of stuff, although I went with a 2x12 for this clean setup. The lead channel is on the second row. You have your normal overall gain control, bass. The mids are split between low and high like the real amp, which I think is a pretty cool feature because you can get very different voicings out of the same thing. I feel like an overall mid control kind of dictates the EQ voicing of an amplifier, but being able to split them between two frequencies, you can kind of dial one a little higher, cut the other one, and you can go from like more rectifier territory to 5150, or even if you back off the gain and change around some of the contouring, you get a more Marshall sound. It's a pretty cool feature that can be harder to dial in because of it, but it makes it so much more versatile. Standard treble control, as I mentioned, the contour control, you have 3 different stages. So you have, it's not engaged, you got kind of this lower mid fat bottom widening thing, and then you got kind of a cut there. So this would be like my normal go-to. This would be like extended range guitars, classic rock stuff, and this would be modern scooped stuff, generally how I approach it. Got your standard volume, low gain, high gain. Now this actually affects both channels. I prefer high gain mostly for the lead channel if you're not using a boost. I find with a suitable plugin, it's fine on low gain a lot of the times. You got your clean lead select, preamp defeat, which is not super useful on a VST version of this, but it is legitimately on the the real preamp, so it's kind of cool they included it. Presence on the power amp, master volume, output volume, and power amp simulation. Of course, if you have another plugin, you can turn that off and get pretty good results as well, but we're going to keep that on. And then again, on the bottom row, you can select between 3 different models of the preamp tubes, oversampling. As with the other plugins, you can change the position of the virtual microphone. Of course, with a lot of this stuff, I prefer to use my own IRs, but the ones they have are pretty good for most things. With all that said, there's a critical piece of information I need to let you guys in on before I go demoing some of these presets. That way you understand why I have certain feelings about them. That is, I just do not like ENGL amps in general. There's a handful of models I adore, like the Savage, the Invader, the Ritchie Blackmore signature's got some pretty great tones, but for the most part, I'm just not a fan. They're not up my alley. They've got this super saturated gain stage sound that just does not work for me. It's that kind of like parody guitar tone. I don't even know how to describe it, but it works fine for a lot of people. But the Fireball, Iron Ball, they've just got this overarching fizzy, I don't know, the lack of definition. I think you're going to hear that a lot in the extended range demo. Is that a knock against Mercuriall? Not at all. I think they've modeled the ENGL sound, and specifically this preamp, almost to the T, because you can listen to demos of the real thing and you're going to hear the exact sounds that are coming out of this. So bravo to them. I'm just not a fan of the E530 and the Iron Ball, Powerball type of amplifiers in general. That's why I put this one off till last, because I wanted to build a case of, I think Mercuriall makes some absolutely outstanding plugins. In this case, though, I'm just not a fan of the amp that they're modeling. So with that said, let's get to demoing. So one of the positive side effects of the gain structure of this preamp is that if you have a suitable guitar, you can pretty much just plug straight into it and get a great metal sound, as I'm doing here. That's not usually how I use amps, which is kind of partially my fault of why I take issue with the overall ENGL sound, but in this case, I think it works phenomenally. So what we're doing is kind of this modern scooped thing that I talked about earlier. We've got this top contour switch engaged. The low mids are backed off quite a bit. We're keeping the high mids more or less intact, backing off the treble, no presence. We want to tame the high end, a little bit of boost to the bass, quite a bit of lead gain with the lead gain high switch engaged. And yeah, I mean, you can pretty much make it sound like a 5150 or rectifier boosted, which is pretty cool for being all in one package. If you're one of those guitars straight into the amp kind of dudes, I can certainly appreciate that. It's one of my favorite features about the Tri-Axis and Mark series from Mesa Boogie, but maybe you're not huge on the Boogie sound. This is a great alternative for that use case. So let's take a bit of a step back and check out some of the cleaner stuff. We're going to be using the clean channel, basically what I showed you earlier. I've got the chorus engaged with a little bit over 50% mix, not too much on the depth or speed. Bright switch engaged. I do have that low clean volume boost engaged, which I think works well with about anything. I'm using EMGs here, but yeah, I really like the results. Still using the built-in impulse responses with 2x12 V30s, and I put a bit of reverb, actually quite a bit of reverb here, using the built-in Cubase stuff. That is one thing that this and Spark have in common. There's no other built-in effects, which is not really, it doesn't take away points from me, although I really appreciate that Reaxis has all of that because it saves insert space and, you know, some CPU overhead, but, you know, you still got plenty of room. So here is the cleans. This is more or less how I would apply most modern sounding clean amps, although it's not a one-trick pony by any stretch of the imagination. Different combinations of the clean gain, input volume, and the clean boost will get you anywhere from even more silky smooth clean sound that I'm demonstrating here to some nice warm mild breakup. So very, very versatile. Moving on with some higher gain, we're here in the lead channel, although still have the gain on the low position, which by itself will be kind of more of a classic rock vibe. But I'm actually combining this with the free Greed Smasher, which is the Grid Slammer by Mesa Boogie, or VST equivalent of that. And let's turn that back to high. So we are, you know, throwing this in front of the preamp just to show that this does take pedals fairly well. Of course, there's the other Tube Screamer variants as well that Mercuriall has, but this is free, so you're not paying, you know, to use that functionality. And kind of got this on a more or less a bass setup, I would say, kind of just trying to tame the high end and a little bit more presence on the bottom, which is one of those things that kind of bothers me about ENGL amps in general. I feel like they're you know, a little wimpy on the low end without some adjustment. Here we're using the G12Ms, which is kind of, you know, basic standard rock and roll Marshall cabinet. So this is what that sounds like. So this is a prime example of one of those things I really, really don't like about most ENGL amps, and I still think this plugin sounds leagues better than most, you know, free VSTs and even a lot of paid VSTs. But in this instance, the attacks of every note sounds like you have the volume rolled off like halfway on your guitar. They sound a little low gain, like they're not very punctuated. But then the rest of the body of the note sounds like you're in this super saturated high gain sound. And it's not just this pedal, because I've demoed this and a lot of other stuff. It's not any Tube Screamer variant in general. It's just kind of what happens when you boost the amp, and that's not what I'm going for. Maybe some people will like it. For me, that's like the exact opposite of what I want to do. It doesn't have the clarity of every note, especially loses clarity on the chords. So I think that's why I really like the Gojira sound I was going for, because you could just plug straight into it and it, you know, retained all the definition and kind of built up a larger sound overall for every individual note than, you know, say if you plug straight into a dual rectifier. But yeah, for this is not what I would use for most lower gain, mid gain applications because of that, if you plan on putting a Tube Screamer in front of it. So let's try something a little higher gain, and for this I knew from the get-go I'm going to have to help this thing out. So we're going to try this with an extended range guitar. So back to my open tuned 8-string, still back on the high gain channel. I do have the high gain mode selected, although we backed off on the gain, so we're, you know, a little between, I'd say 10 and 11 o'clock. And that's because I wanted everything going into the amp to do most of the work. Now I'm going to disable a couple things and let you hear just what the plugin itself is doing. But I've got that bottom contour engaged, as I said earlier, that brings out the low mids and kind of helps out on stuff that's tuned below, you know, D or C standard For the boost, we're using a Tube Screamer, which is also made by Mercuriall, probably one of the best Tube Screamer, I would say, imitations out there, except I've rolled off on the 220 hertz, which is the standard EQ going into it, because yeah, you can't just throw a Tube Screamer into this kind of amp with a 7 or 8 string. It just doesn't sound all that good. It's too flubby. So this is what it sounds like with the built-in T75 IRs and the amp as you see. Now I'm going to try that with a different impulse response, and this is one thing that I really liked about Reaccess, that you could just load everything in on one plugin. Here I'll have to use Ignite Amps NAD IR to load my own, so I'm using some of my favorites, the Bro and Mesa 4x12s, just using the straight up SM57, and this is with their interpretation, or my favorite interpretation, of a V30. I think that showcases two key points that need to be made. First of all, the built-in impulse responses in this plugin don't really play as nice with this preamp, I find, compared to Spark and Reaccess, at least for the stuff that I'm going after. Because of that, I would highly suggest that any updates in the future include being able to add your own personal IR, just like Reaccess. That goes for Spark as well, because it would be nice not to have to use a third-party plugin to be able to do that, and because I like Mercurial's idea of having everything built into one plugin, and this is just kind of your one-stop shop. So that would be pretty cool. The second thing, though, is that no matter what IR I use to improve the overall EQ or definition of the tone, I still can't get rid of that problem I was talking about, where you got this fuzzy trail after the note and it just loses clarity. So again, I'm just not a big fan of most ENGL amps because they have kind of that quality. If you are, cool. I think this is a phenomenal interpretation of the E530. It sounds practically identical to all the demos and stuff I've heard. So if that's what you're going for, you want a straight plug into your computer, type device for that sound, then I don't think you're going to find much of a better one. I do believe there's a free version of the E530 somewhere that I've used before, and I've gotten decent results out of it, but I found that not only did it not sound terribly like the E530, it had all the problems that I didn't like about it to begin with. So yeah, you can probably go check that one out before you make a verdict on this one, but this is the plugin that I could personally recommend least out of all the Mercurial stuff I've checked out. That, of course, once again, that doesn't speak to the quality of this plugin. It's obviously super high quality. I always appreciate when someone's able to capture the real controls of the thing they're emulating in digital form. That's super cool. One of the drawbacks of stuff like fractal audio in a lot of cases where they try to group basically everything's controls into one standardized UI. But I think with a couple improvements, like being able to use your own impulse response, like with Reaccess, and maybe a stomp box or two, who knows, would maybe make this one a bit more favorable to me. So yeah, if you like ENGL amps, definitely something worth checking out. It's just not super my cup of tea, although able to get some pretty cool sounds out of it regardless. So hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to check out the other Mercurial reviews if you enjoyed this one with Spark and Reaccess.
Huge thanks once again to Mercuriall for letting me check these out. I've had a blast playing through them, and look forward to anything else that they're cooking up for the near future. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.